Hey guys, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel. And not that long ago we hit 1,000 subscribers, and as part of the entry conditions to be in a chance to win some merchandise and some Games Workshop goodies, I asked you to ask me some questions so that I can make a Q&A video. And this video is exactly that. So sit back with a cup of coffee. It's about an hour long. So your names, if anyone entered that competition, all of those questions are going to be answered. So there are about 63 questions. So as I said, it's a little bit long. So sit back, put it on in the background, chill out, enjoy, and see you on the other side. Let's get into it. So here we go then, guys. This is going to be in no particular order. I've just got the video up in front of me, just on the left here on my screen. I'm just going to, glance over, look at the questions, come back to camera, and give you the answer. So they're in no particular order. It's just going to be a scroll through. So there could be some repetitive questions. I have had a cursory look through, so there might be some repetition in here, but we'll see where we get to as we go through. So the first question is from Idic Nick Beer, and he's asking, what would make me start a Space Wolf army again? Well, recently I did sell a Space Wolf army. That's probably what's prompted this question. In fact, that was the second Space Wolf army I have sold. The first one was sort of a long time ago, and I sold that to fund a purchase of an airbrush. The second army, though, I have sold. That was a more recent army. Didn't include all the new cool pieces that came out with the relaunch of the Space Wolves that long ago. So I didn't have any of the new flyers or anything like that. It was pretty standard. And the reason I sold it was space. So I've been collecting for a long time, and it came to a point of what armies am I not using, what armies can I get rid of, and it got to a point where lack of space, lack of storage, and I thought, you know what, it's time for a trim down. So my main focus was trying to keep 2 Xenos armies, 2 Imperium armies, 2 Chaos armies, and then a couple of funky things. So things like Knights would come into that kind of remit, or Adeptus Mechanicus, something a little bit out of the ordinary, even though they technically are Imperium armies. So what would make me start one again is if I got a bigger house, or somewhere else better to store them. If I had like maybe an outdoor garden room or something like that. There's a hint to the wife. Then that would, if I had the space and I could store them more effectively, maybe on some nice display shelves, then that's what I'd do. But I'm limited by space, and I've just got too big a collection of models. So I hope that answers your question. Next question is from Peninsula Painting Projects, and he asks, what's my favourite TV series? That's a great question. Probably from a more recent time, Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad was superb. But historically, the only TV series I've ever purchased on something like iTunes was the original series of Battlestar Galactica. So the 1970s, Dirk Benedict, Lorne Greene, that kind of era, Battlestar Galactica. It's the only one I've ever bought. I have watched it so many times. So probably technically that might be my my favourite ever TV series. So the next question is from David Smith, and he asks, what's the worst thing that's happened to you hobby related? His example was his son throwing his Storm Raven out the window thinking it could fly. Now, in no way could anyone imagine any Imperium vehicles ever flying. They're about as aeronautic looking as a brick. So yeah, your son's got some creative imagination thinking a Storm Raven could ever fly. Worst thing that's ever happened, I went to a competition or a tournament not that long ago. I think it was early last year, and my Storm Eagle gunship, so very similar to yours, has a really bad mounting point on the bottom. If anyone's ever had one, it's a really shallow mount for the flying stem. Now this is a Golden Demon finalist model, my only ever entry, my only ever finalist badge. It appeared in White Dwarf Visions a couple of years ago when they were still running that magazine. Very proud of that. And because of that mount, and it was on the edge of the board, and it fell off and broke. And there's a small piece missing from it. The rest of it was, reasonably well repairable. But it broke, so that's probably the biggest incident to probably my most prized model in my collection. Question then is from Jamie Linsell, and he asks, what model or terrain piece have you most enjoyed customising or kit bashing to add your own personal flair to? Interesting one again. If you've been following my channel recently, I have been really going ham on terrain pieces at the moment, so probably from a kit bash perspective is, you know, mashing a lot of these Sector Imperialis, Sector Mechanicus terrain kits and just making them usable. I've really enjoyed that process. Using a bit of Luke's APS ground cover technique has been really enjoyable. I've not been huge on kit bashing for a long time within you know, regular 40k type models. My old Space Wolf army was completely helmetless. Every single one of them had a bare head with different hairstyles sculpted onto them, so that was probably the biggest conversion I'd done, which isn't exactly that exciting. I tend to just paint what comes out of the box. Conversions used to excite me, but now not so much. I'd rather just have something complete and move on. So probably the answer to that question specifically is, you know, the biggest kit bash is probably the Bastion with the Sky Shield landing pad on, the thermic regulator and the thermic pipes. So that's a kit bash of probably about 5 different kits, and I really enjoyed that. I haven't finished painting it, it is coming very soon, but I really enjoyed that process of making something from stuff that's a bit bland into something that looks a bit cool. Next question is from Scott B, and he asks, if I was going to start a new kill team, what would it be and why? Now, I own Kill Team, I own all the terrain kits for it. I've been making terrain that is compatible with Kill Team. I have yet to play a game though. So what army would I start for Kill Team? It would be Genestealer Colts. I think the new models, if you've seen the new bike models and the quad bike that's due to come out for the Genestealer Colt release, which I believe is going to be probably January now, they look awesome. Genestealer Colts I've been interested in for a long time, back in the fluff when you had sort of Genestealer limousines and cool stuff like that. So if I was to do it again, if I was to do an army specifically for Kill Team, it would be Genestealer Colts. Roy Oliver asks, what is my favourite Eldar from any codex unit? Now, if you've seen any of my dated videos, some that go back to my earlier content production, which is a bit questionable, you'll notice that I've got a very large Eandon Eldar Aldari collection, Craftworld Eldar. So Eandon has been my biggest favourite, but I've owned probably most of the models in the range over time. But my favourite unit, even though the sculpts are pretty terrible, are the Warp Spiders. I love the concept of them with their warp jump generators. Their guns are pretty cool. You know, they're strength 6, I think their guns are, double shots. Very, very flexible unit. A little bit expensive on the points, but I do remember a game quite some time ago now where a whole unit of them, I think I used to run about a full squad of 10, and I faced a Terminator heavy army, and I put fire into a 10-man Terminator unit, and he rolled lots and lots of ones, and it was quite funny to watch, really, back in the days when Terminators were on that single wound. So I think they've been statistically, well, not statistically, but traditionally my favourite unit. And as I've said, I've owned many different types of Eldar unit in my collection. So that would probably be my answer. Big Mech Dan Skull, thank you very much for your question. And that is, with the bleep at the end of my video, it made him wonder if I'd always intended for this to be a family-friendly channel, or were you swearing like a trooper in the early days? If you go back through any of my videos, I think I may have dropped only 1 or 2 expletives that I forgot to bleep out. It is an intentional thing to make this a access all ages channel, even though if you look at my analytics, I think my analytics indicate that my mainstay audience is probably 25 to 40 year olds. I think is the 25 to 35 and 35 to 45 I think is the main category. So everyone who's really watching is actually an adult, but the reality is this hobby is open from, you know, pretty much 11-year-olds and onwards, and should any parents want to watch this channel for some bizarre reason, and they've got their kids in on the hobby and so on, and they don't like the swearing, then I avoid it. So I want it to be accessible to everyone who comes and finds this channel. So it is a deliberate intention not to curse on the channel or show anything untoward, or, you know, that kind of approach. I do want it to be family friendly, and that probably spirals off of a couple of YouTubers that I watch that do a lot of console gaming, and they've deliberately gone family friendly as well, and they were the kind of people that probably inspired me to actually create a channel, even though this is a completely different subject. Just their attitude and ethos around their channel is something I wanted to emulate. Now, the unprofessional wargaming journey, who is the unprofessional hobbyist who's had a rebrand on his name, has got multiple questions here. Do I wear trousers when I record? Yes, Typically tracksuit bottoms because they're more comfortable. But that I do wear trousers. Yeah, so I'm not. I'm not naked from the t-shirt downwards. Do you think there is space in the Marine Codex for more models? No, I think the Marine Codex is saturated with enough Primaris Lieutenants to last a lifetime and to make their own codex. I think there are enough models to do every kind of job. You've got scouts, you've got tough troops, you've got all the heavy support. You've got so many options in the Marine Codex to do anything in the game, from anti-armour to anti-horde and everything in between. So for me, I think the Codex for Space Marines in general is pretty maxed out. And one final question from you. If I had the chance to make a model / unit for your favourite army, what would it be? I have absolutely no idea. A model or a unit for my favourite... I don't even know what my favourite army is anymore. The Backgrounds of Space Wolves has always been my favourite. My favourite army at the moment is probably Imperial Knights. So, if I had an option to do something for those, perhaps a 4-legged or 6-legged... some kind of super transport heavy thing. I don't really know. Maybe it can carry baby knights inside it as a deployment thing. A big knight transporter. I don't really know, to be honest. That would be quite cool though, wouldn't it? Really? Maybe. But thank you for your question. Adam Edgar, the winner of the giveaway. You need to actually speak to me to get your prize, by the way. I'd like to know what you think the effect will be on 40k due to the possibility of Primaris upgrades for Space Marine champions now that Calgar has evolved. So as we all know, Primanius Calgar has been given the Mark 10 armour and been resculpted and relaunched fairly recently. What do I think the effect will be on 40k? I think the effect will be pretty positive. I mean, everything's going up in scale from an aesthetic perspective, but because the storyline is evolving with, lots of canon being rewritten and Cowell and Gilliman, leading the way, developing new troops and new armour and everything else, I think that's probably been about time in the storyline for 40k to evolve, and that these leaders are going to get the latest and greatest tech. So for me, I think it's in the right direction from a storyline perspective. How that transpires in rules and balance and everything else, I'm not really sure yet. But I'd like to see things like Commander Dante get some cool new armour. I'd like to see Ragnar Blackmane get some new armour. So I think it'll also enable us to skip the old metal, tiny, silly little two-dimensional sculpts and allow Games Workshop to skip the bit to refresh that range and go straight into the new plastic range. I think that's the right direction. I think it's cool for the game. Midnight 2142. Do I create stories or lore for my armies even if they aren't technically canon? For example, I run Necrons, Imperial Soup, Starting Tower, created them to be allied with each other as a brief example. I have created some background before. If you've followed this channel before, you'll know that I like to attend Games Workshop campaign events. Those campaign events are typically very narrative based, and there's always a little entry point to ask you if you want to come up with any background for your forces, why they're in this particular sector, why they're fighting, who the names are of your characters, why this squad's with them, and so on and so forth. I've done that with with Iron Warriors before. I created some background for those, and more recently my Demon of Thousand Suns forces at the recent campaign, I did create a background sheet for those, which was around the concept of two exalted sorcerers which were leading the forces, and they were bitter rivals. So one favoured the demonic side of things, so he was in charge of anything with the demon keyword and all the summoning and all of the demon aspect of it, and the other one favoured the more traditional rubric side of it. So that was the kind of aspect of it. So I did create an A4 page of text for those, but I only tend to do it for those events. I don't just do it, just ad hoc, just for the sake of it. So I do it, but I don't do it regularly. Hope that covers that one. Carl Finch has asked, do I have any theories about the 2 redacted Space Marine Legions? And if he happens to win any of the prizes, please redraw it because he's won before. Which is very generous of you, Carl. Unfortunately, you didn't win, but you had won several of the other giveaways. But thank you very much for that. I must iterate that. That's very generous of you. Theories about the 2 redacted Space Marines. I think there were baby Primarchs. I think they were born. But I don't think even, I mean, it's a difficult one, that one, isn't it, really? I do remember a piece in one of the Black Library books about Malcador was talking to Dawn, and they were walking through the Hall of Heroes, or whatever it's called, on Terra, and they've got the plinths, and on those plinths is a statue of each of the Primarchs, except the Chaos ones, the ones that have fallen to Chaos, have all been covered over or destroyed or something like that. And there was 2 empty plinths, and Dawn turns to Malcador and says, if only we had, these other legions to support us, or words to that effect, because this was just post-Istvan, where, you've gone Traitor versus Chaos. And it would have tipped the balance if there'd been 2 more Imperial, Primarchs leading their legions. And Malcador's quip comment was, the less we talk about them, the better. So that kind of leads me to believe that something went drastically wrong with these 2 baby Primarchs as part of the Emperor's gene seed and his creations. So I think they might have been babies, but I think the Emperor might have eaten the babies or killed them or something. I don't think they were, warp stormed away like everyone else. I think they were potentially terminated at birth for some other nasty reason. Something genetically went wrong. So that's probably all I've got on that, really. Stick of the dump, we're back to Primaris again. What do I think of the Primaris range? I really like them from a painter's perspective. More surface area, more details to work with. Gives you a little bit more forgiving space when you're painting these things. I think the scale is quite nice. I haven't actually painted a single Primaris Marine yet. I do own several. In fact, the first one that I'm going to be doing is down on my desk here. There it is. So this is the store. There's a store. Is it the 500th store special edition Primaris Lieutenant with his Bolt Stalker pattern with the helmet off. So this is the first one I'm going to be doing. I need to get him primed and ready to go because I have an imminent game with Nick Beer, and he is going to be in my army. But I really like the idea of them. I see no qualms in the technology advances to create them. 2 wounded and everything else. So from a lore perspective, I see no problems with it. Long term, are they going to replace the regular tactical marines? Maybe, but for now, I quite like the scale of them. I think they look really cool. They do make other models in other factions look a bit silly though, because that scale is just that much bigger. So Hellcorrex26 has asked, what's the worst disaster in the miniature hobby for your miniatures? I just covered that really. That was my Storm Eagle gunship being knocked off or elbowed off, or whichever it was. My Golden Demon finalist model, prized in my collection. Tragic. Yeah, that's he had a 4-year-old miniature crash on the ground after his son knocked it off the painting table. Very similar conditions to mine, but yeah, same answer as before. So we'll move on to the next one. So William Rosebrock has asked, what are my thoughts on rumours surrounding Chapter Approved 2018? Any specific rumours that have me excited? Well, the releases are out now. In fact, when this video drops, you'll be able to purchase Chapter Approved 2018, and I think most people would have seen all of the leaks from that already. So far, all I've done is gone through and looked at some points changes with regard to an army I'm going to be using against Nick Beer in a week's time. From what I've seen, I think the points changes are probably quite valid. It is annoying that it's going to be yet another book to carry around, so I've now got a rule book, 2 Chapter Approved, codexes. It's becoming very book heavy once again, but which is very annoying, as you can tell. But the rumours of the Vigilus campaign book, which is going to introduce formations again, has me quite excited, providing they're not anywhere near implemented the way they were previously. And from my understanding, you're going to use command points to get some bonus rules if you make formations in a specific way. So I'm hoping that's rebalanced. I think I've seen the Imperial Fist example. It doesn't look overly powerful, costs you a lot of points, gives you a bit of added flexibility to an army. So no qualms about it, but so far all I've done is just skim through some points changes. Things that really got me, I think Blood Angels Blood Talons have basically halved in price. I think they were 65 down to 35. But yeah, there's some cool changes, I think. But by the time you see this video, you may have already got a copy of that in your hands anyway. Basic Miniature Painting has asked what company I use for my merchandise. So far I've used Vistaprint, and I can't remember the name of the company for the mugs that I used. And through the magic of video editing, it's a company called Get It Branded. So just Google those, you'll come up with that. I think that's all I've used those guys for, is for the coffee mugs. So other than that, Vistaprint, there's always deals going on with Vistaprint. The quality is a bit questionable, but I just wanted something cheap and cheerful and does the job, really. So there we go. Luke Schoen, I think that's pronounced correctly, or Luke Schoen. I'm not really sure. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name one of those two ways correctly. Have I heard of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis? No, that's the wrong forum. Do I prefer Star Wars or Star Trek, or neither? Star Wars. End of. Huge fan of the Star Wars franchise. I love all of the new movies. I don't care what anyone says. The prequels, yep, questionable. Yep, we'll move on from those. Although the Duel of the Fates fight scene with Darth Maul is awesome. Rogue One is now my favourite Star Wars movie. Don't at me. I think it's better than The Empire Strikes Back, which has always been my favourite until then. I love the new Solo movie. I think that's a really cool deep dive into the world in between the Rebellion and the Imperials. I think that's really cool. And I didn't even question the fact that it wasn't Harrison Ford. It was just, I thought the guy played it really, really well. But yeah, a huge fan of Star Wars. I do enjoy Star Trek. Big fan of The Next Generation. Didn't really get into Galaxy or Deep Space Nine or what's the other one, Enterprise. I did watch the new series that's on Netflix. I've forgotten what it's called now. Quite enjoyed that. But yeah, I was a big fan of Next Gen. I probably can remember most of the episodes if I was to see them again. But Star Wars is number one. End of. 6+ Stevo is asking, when, where and how did I get into the hobby? I think I might have answered this on an FAQ before, or a Q&A before. I was probably a very young teenager, maybe a little bit before that, maybe somewhere between 10 and 13, something along those lines. A long time ago now, 30 odd years ago. I had some guys move in, or a new family move into my road, and they brought with them, I think, either the cardboard edition, you know, the very first edition of Blood Bowl, and I think they had some really old sculpted metal orcs. And when I started getting to know the family's children that were sort of my age and my brother's age, we started playing that. Got introduced to a local gaming store in London called Orcs Nest, which I believe is still there, but I don't think they do sort of 40k anymore. I think they're more into Magic and things like that these days. So I used to save my pocket money up and head into town. I remember picking up my very first RTB 01 Space Marines, the old Rhinos, when you got, was it 3 for a tenner or whatever it was. Very, very cheap back in the day. Although cheap is perspective, you know, had no money, you know, you're on pocket money back then, so everything was expensive. But that's pretty much how I got into it. Took a huge break through sixth form and university, and probably my first 2 years at work, so I probably got back into it at about 22, 23. So that's been a while now. It's been pretty much 20 years solid, plus those early years. So that's what got me into it. Hope that answers your question. Jonathan Hanna has asked, you don't drink coffee? That's heresy. Well, that's just true facts. There's another question coming up on coffee in a bit. What type of car do you drive? I drive a boy racer car. I drive a Focus RS, the new Mark IV version. A couple of years old now, so I'm probably looking to change it very soon. I also ride a motorbike. I have a Triumph Street Triple RS. So both are RSs, bit of a boy racer, but that is my car. Daniel Grant is asking, do I have a particular weekly hobby time schedule that I try and stick to? Well, I probably do hobby most evenings, much to the annoyance of my wife, but my wife has got a lovely hobby of her own now, so I don't feel quite as bad that she's hobbying in another room whilst I'm creating videos and painting bits of terrain, which is what's always going on the desk these days. So pretty regular, unless I'm working late or I'm actually out, which isn't that often, to be honest. So yeah, fairly regular, a good few hours pretty much most evenings. So whether that's either creating videos or creating content to go into a future video. Pretty much everything I do now is almost recorded by a camera, so that I can either pick and choose or have something that I can create into a video at some point in the future. Michael Murchie has asked something more related to YouTube. Has working on YouTube dampened your enthusiasm for the hobby, or has it given you more focus to complete the models you start? Definitely given me more focus, but what it means is everything takes 4 times as long. Because I'm recording everything and trying to do video or content based on what I'm actually doing, the whole process takes that a little bit longer. So if you're painting a squad of models, for example, I'll do a full guide on a single model, which I'm recording at each stage and trying to zoom and get good focus and explanation on that one model. But you're actually painting in batches of maybe 5. So for every 10 seconds of video where you might be painting a pauldron or a gun or something, you've got to replicate that 5 times and then come back to it. And so for 10 seconds of video, that painting might have taken you 10 minutes, times by 5 is 50 minutes. So it's extended the process of my hobby, but has made the enthusiasm, that much more. During 7th edition, I really lost my mojo with 40k. I thought the rules were terrible. I thought it just became a very awful game to play, so I pretty much stopped for almost a year before I started YouTube. 8th edition coming along, got my mojo back, wanted to get back into it, and this was a good in route to keep me motivated, because if I don't do stuff, I don't have a video. If I don't have a video, I don't have a channel. If I don't have a channel, people aren't going to watch, and then we don't do giveaways. But I really like the interaction side of it. I've made a lot of new friends on social media because of it, met some cool new people because of it, and it's kind of spiralling in that kind of effect. So for me, takes longer, but definitely more enthusiasm. Do I finish projects quicker? Probably not. I'm still a bit of a hobby butterfly, so I've still got that terrain going on, but in the meantime, I've also got Adeptus Titanicus Knights on the go. What else is on the go? Nothing jumps to mind right here. But yeah, several other things on the go, because I want to try and keep the content reasonably varied, even though I have failed in the last couple of months. So yeah, several things are on the go, so focus is probably not as good as it should be. The Johnsonator has asked, do I ever feel like I have to upload, have being in uppercase, content just because the channel's gone in the direction, or do you purely do it how you want, when you want, and about what you want? Yes. I don't have a fixed schedule. If I have a fixed schedule, then I have to dedicate specific time. If I'm not feeling it, or because this isn't a full-time job, I might not have the opportunity to complete a video for a schedule. I do try and record a couple in advance, but that's not always possible. So I tend to focus on what I'm doing at the time. So early this year was a big focus on demons, ready to go to an event. Now it's been a big focus on terrain. Earlier in the year it was a focus on something else. So it comes in stops and starts. And I think once you've got the flow for a particular project, and that flow is sticking with you, you've got to run with it. If you lose the enthusiasm for doing something, then you stop and you find something else. And that's normally how you work it out around when you've lost interest in something, you stop it and find something else that you've got a bit more interest in. When I'm on a mission, I knew I had to complete 37 models for this campaign, and so I tirelessly worked on those, and I didn't lose focus in it, and therefore that gave me some good content, some good tactics videos, some good showcase videos, and it led to a review of the campaign weekend, and I thought that was a good little section of videos. Right now, I'm really loving the terrain, as I'm sure you could tell. It may not be to everyone's tastes, but it's my channel. If you don't like it, you can skip the video and find something else to watch. That is the viewer's privilege and the viewer's choice, which I fully support, because there is so much content out there that if you don't like these terrain videos, or you don't like the content, you can just go and find someone else and then come back when you get a notification, because obviously you're subscribed with that notification button turned on, right? That the next video thumbnail that comes up and says, you know what, I want to watch that, and you can crack in. I'm not forcing anyone to be here. You're here of your own volition, and I am thankful that you are. The Wargaming Viking has asked, would I consider collecting or painting Crimson Fists? I have a huge Imperial Fist army, so Crimson Fist being a successor of those. I had thought about it actually not that long ago to add a small contingent of, or a small detachment of Crimson Fists fighting alongside the Imperial Fist. That may happen in the future. Nothing I've done so far, but I've got the models and the shoulder pads and the iconography all ready to go for Imperial Fist, so it's not beyond the realms of possibility to add those in. Alberta Hall has asked, Huge congratulations. Really looking forward to seeing what you come up with in 2019. My question, how do you manage to spend so much time on the hobby without getting into trouble with Mrs. OABG? Who says I don't get into trouble with Mrs. OABG? That's the question. Well, that's the answer that you should really be thinking about. I think I mentioned a little while ago, Mrs. OABG has a hobby of her own, which makes me feel a little bit less guilty, but sometimes I still do feel guilty that I spend too much time in this hobby creation den and not enough time with the family. But we still manage to have, date nights, we still go out on weekends, we still do stuff together. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we're on an even keel. I'm not in too much trouble. So, but we've got Christmas holidays coming up. We'll be spending lots of time together with friends and family and so on. So I'm hoping I'm not in too much trouble. And I do get told when I've crossed the line. Right now, I think I'm millimetres just below the line because I've got some of my terrain pieces still down in the dining room and some hobby overflow on the landing in just outside that door over there, and I'm being reminded frequently to clear it away and I haven't, so I'm probably very close to a yellow card right now. But thank you for the question, Alberta. Carpe McCarthy. What Warhammer Mini that you haven't painted yet would you love to paint? I've painted many miniatures, but what haven't I painted that I'd like to paint? I've had to have a little think about that, so I'm hoping I'm going to remember to edit out the gap there. But I still don't know the answer, even after I think about it. Because pretty much any miniature that I really like the look of, I'll just go and buy and paint. But I do like the Forge World Mastodon. I think that's a pretty cool kit. I've never painted one of those. But Games Workshop model? The reality is, there probably isn't one at the moment. Everything that I've really liked, I've actually gone and bought and painted. So, honestly, there's probably nothing out there in the range at the moment that I've loved enough to go and buy. I don't own Marnius Calgar, or Primanius Calgar, as he should be called these days. So maybe one day I might want to go and paint him. I haven't painted an Imperial Primarch before, so could be worth a go on one of those maybe. That'll probably do for an answer, I hope. Jake Curran, we're back to Primaris again. Now it's been confirmed that Old Marines can be upgraded. Well, we knew that for a long time. Belisarius Cowell has given all of the chapters the ability to create their own Primaris Marines after the first phase is complete. What's my stance on Primaris? I like them. I think it's evolved the story enough. There's no reason why people like him shouldn't have been, working in secret vaults, gene grafting these and accelerated growth, these new super soldiers to fight the storyline with the new, the new warp rift that's spread across the galaxy. I've seen no reason why the Imperium shouldn't be creating new super soldiers to fight in that future war. So I'm all for it. I think from a model aesthetic perspective, they're really cool. So I'm happy that the story is evolving and therefore Primaris are part of it. As long as the other forces, the other factions keep up from a rules-based perspective, I think we should be okay. Martin McDonald has asked, what inspired you to dedicate time to make a YouTube channel? Kind of leaned on this a little bit earlier, so I've got a couple of gaming console gamers, mainly Call of Duty guys that I follow. I really like their ethos and their ability to create content. It's a little bit easier to create gaming content because basically you just record gameplay and then you talk about it, or you go and do testing on a game that's already got the content created for you. With this hobby, we need to create content, record it, and make a video about whatever it is that we're talking about. So they probably my biggest inspiration to make a channel the way that I've made it. Family friendly, as best quality and audio that I can muster. But really getting into 40k again after that hiatus of about a year around the end of 7th edition, I wanted to get back into it, and combined with that inspiration of those guys that do YouTube, we're talking 400k plus subscribers, these guys, so they're pretty big channels, or big-ish channels. So I wanted to combine their ethos with my love of this hobby. So getting me back into 8th edition and back into 40k, combine the two, and we ended up where we've ended up. Dark Highwayman has asked, do I think the Sanguinor is a demon of Sanguinius sent by the Emperor? Now, to be honest, I don't know enough about Blood Angel background and fluff to be able to answer that. So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to skip this question because I just don't know. Is the honest answer. I'm sorry about that, but I'm going to have to move on to another question because I just don't know the answer. Richard King, we're back on Primaris again. My question is, how long do you think non-Primaris Marines are going to be part of the game? That's a bone of contention been floating around since the concept of Primaris or True Scale Marines, whatever you want to refer to them as. I still think there's a very valid spot for the traditional tactical Marine, the Devastator Marines, the Scouts and so on, the old scale Marines. I think the kits are still very good. I don't think they need to change. They've already moved to 32mm bases, which has made a huge improvement on the general aesthetic of a standard Space Marine. But I don't think they're going to go anywhere. I don't think there's an evolution or Games Workshop are going to phase them out. I still think that tactical Marines and old school Marines still have a place in the game. Different battlefield roles, you know, from missile launchers and las cannons and plasma cannons that Primaris can't take at the moment. The only equivalent weapons they've got come on their repulsors and their aggressors or something like that. So from a tactical and a gaming perspective, I still think they have a space. Will Games Workshop phase them out? I don't think so. They're too big a seller and too many people have got vested interest in Space Marines. They're not going to shelve their Space Marine armies to create Primaris ones. That's never going to happen. I think it would be a financial blunder if Games Workshop did that. Mountain Yeti is up next and he says, what is my favourite model from Warhammer 40k from any army or faction? I think I might have answered this before in a previous Q&A. My favourite model, from the background perspective, it's probably been a Logan Grimnar, the uber god of the Space Wolves. Always been a good fluff character. Appears in some good books. Background very cool. Even the model, the old school metal model of him with his outstretched axe and everything else was really cool. He's on a slave thing now these days, isn't he? Not as good as before, I don't think. But from a favourite lore perspective, yeah, I think I'd go with him. He's pretty cool, in my opinion. So I hope that answers that question. Rage Against the Dice is up. What was my first ever model I purchased? Now, going back to that previous question about what got me into the hobby, my first ever purchased model, I think, was an old school fantasy orc. I think I might still have them in a box in the garage somewhere. But yeah, they were really low scale on like 20mm slotter bases, 2D models, flat pressed casting. That's probably my oldest. I do have some really old school Terminators as well, from, I think they're date stamped in the 90s somewhere. So that's probably my first ever one that I can remember purchasing, is like these old school orc that I used to use in the first sort of model version of Blood Bowl. Whether they were the correct models to use or not didn't really matter when you're 11 or 12. So I think that was my first ever set of purchased models. So thank you for the question, and we move on to Alex Attempts Tabletop. Thank you for your kind words. And what's my favourite flavour of Pringles? Barbecue, I'd probably say, or maybe just ready salted plain ones. I'm not overly adventurous with my crisp choice flavours, so yeah, barbecue or the plain ones, to be honest. But once you pop, you can't stop. Thanks for the question. The Orc Boys, you need to get in contact with me as well, because you've come third in the giveaway. So please contact me at oldaveragebrit@gmail.com. And your question is, why don't I drink coffee? I hate it. I don't like the smell. I don't like anything to do with coffee. I've had one cup of coffee in my entire life, and that was at my first ever job interview, because I needed something, because my mouth had gone so dry, because it's my first ever interview after university. Had no idea what to expect, and the standard thing when you go into an office is you're always offered coffee, and I just said yes, because back then when I was going for jobs, just asking for water wasn't particularly the done thing. It was always coffee. Nowadays, obviously, everyone drinks water. But yeah, I hated every step of it, but it bought me time to answer a question in that interview. So it'd be, you know, oh, tell me about the time you were challenged to do this. You know, typical interview fluff questions. And at that point, you could sit there and instead of just pondering into space and buying yourself time, that's when you go for your coffee sip in a job interview. It's a good tip for everyone out there. That's when you can buy time without looking like you're buying time. Go for your coffee or your, nowadays, water drink. But I just don't like the smell of it, don't like the taste of it. Don't drink tea either, just if you want to ask that question as well. Hot chocolate though, yeah, bang on. But thank you for the question, and we move on to James Meeks. What did you first paint job on a model look like? What did my first paint job on a model? Absolutely shocking. You know, you're 10 or 11 years old, I can't hold a paintbrush. You had like I think I was using like Airfix paintbrushes, which were a little bit bigger than what we use these days. Triple zeros and quadruple zeros just didn't exist. So it was basically green and red and black, and that was pretty much all the paints I owned. It looked shocking. And I'm sure that's probably a common thing if you started a long time ago compared to, you know, however many years you've been painting. Everything will always get better. But yeah, the first one, awful. But thanks for the question. So Matt Norwood is up next, and he says, what do I do to get over a lack of motivation to pick up a paintbrush? If I don't pick up a paintbrush, I pick up a controller and I will go and play on my PlayStation. If I'm sitting there, and quite often in fact when I'm waiting for things to dry and I've got a paintbrush there for no reason whatsoever, if I'm waiting for things to dry, I'll jump on the console and I will play some Call of Duty, or right now Red Dead Redemption or something like that. So if I'm out of hobby painting mojo, then I switch on the PlayStation and I go and do badly at Call of Duty against, you know, 16-year-olds who are far better equipped with better thumbs and better reaction time than an old person like me's got these days. So that's pretty much what I do. If I've got that lack of motivation, I'll go and do something else. But the reality is I haven't lost motivation since I've started YouTube, and I'm coming up to a 2-year anniversary. January next year is going to be the 2nd year of my channel. Well, I've done 2 years, so I'll be going into the 3rd year of the channel. And I haven't lost motivation since starting YouTube, and I think that is a positive out of it, because I've been painting pretty much all year round, or for 2 years pretty much solidly, without that loss of motivation, and without you guys watching my videos, which gives me a lot of motivation, because if I do stuff or I post it on Instagram or I post it on Twitter or on Facebook, I get some nice interaction, which is something you don't get if you just sit in your room and paint for yourself. You don't get that interaction. So you don't get that kind of cool vibe. You know, people are actually seeing it and appreciating the efforts that you put in. So for me, if I've lost interest for that for a little bit, PlayStation goes on. But just interacting with the community in general as I go through my hobby progress and share it with you guys out there, that gives me that renewed focus again. So I hope that answers the question. Ellis Wilson has asked, where is the artwork from in the background? If you can see in the background, now illuminated by some lovely lighting, is this great artwork of a knight. And that was a 40th birthday present from a friend of mine that I've known in the hobby world for as long as I can remember, since I've come back, you know, since 20 years or so. So I've known him for a long, long time. And he got me that for my 40th birthday present. I believe it comes from a company called Deviant Art, but I don't know whether he commissioned someone to draw it and then gave it to them to print it on the canvas, or whether it is a stock picture. I've never actually gone and looked. I've not seen anyone else with it, so I'm wondering whether he did actually get an artist to do it. I'm not 100% sure. I only see him a couple of times a year these days, so maybe what I'll do next time is maybe ask him. Next time we catch up. But yeah, it is awesome. It does look good on that wall, especially now I've put some lights around it. I think it looks quite epic. But yeah, that's where it's come from. I believe it came from Deviant Art, which is a good company to go and buy some cool stuff from. Hobbyist from the Warp has asked, what got me into the hobby and when did I get into it? I have answered that already before. Told you, just as a reminder, new family moved into my old road many years ago. They had Blood Bowl. Case of our story ends there. So yeah, 30 odd years ago, whatever it was, new family. So I have answered that. If you want to rewind the video, or if you've already seen that bit of the video, you'll know the answer. But thank you anyway. Peter Nicholas is up next. I could do with a new mouse mat. Well, yes. But unfortunately, you didn't win this time around. Maybe next time. My question is, what do I find the most difficult thing about producing these videos? Lighting. Lighting is a pain. Trying to get something that lights up and that shows on video is quite painful. I have a very convoluted lighting setup now, which I think is beginning to work. I think it's okay. It's been like this for a couple of months now. I have tried various different lighting solutions, but that's probably the most difficult thing about producing a video, especially when you're doing a painting one, to be able to capture it close enough to a camera that's well lit that people can see. And talking of that, then being able to paint to camera, bearing in mind the camera's probably in your way, you've got lots of light coming down, so the lighting is good, but the camera gets in your way, and you might be painting at an angle that isn't natural for you because you're having to lean forward to get into shot, rather than, you know, you might be painting up sort of like this, just when you're painting eyes or getting some detail in, whereas normally you'd be painting a bit further away so the camera can see what's going on. So camera, position and lighting. If you watch my earlier videos, the lighting was poor, the camera angle was poor, my hand kept getting in the way of certain angles and so on. I think I've got that sorted with all kinds of stuff going on in the background. If you go and catch my setup video, I think I did a couple of photos maybe on Instagram as well, to see the current technical solution in here. It is a bit crazy. There's cables and lights and lamps and everything all over the place. In fact, you might be able to see this. Look, this is it's a lamp that's on a big swing arm, but I've also got a photography light over there for the general thing. But this one here, you can see, is on this big arm, which is clamped to a shelf on the wall. And this is a daylight lamp. And this is the one I use for sort of close up to myself kind of thing. And it can go up and down and everything else and move that all around. But yeah, lighting is very difficult, but very important, especially in a hobby like this. It's not so important in many other videos, but to try and show people what you're doing, you need it to be well lit and not covered in shadows or your hands are in the way or anything like that. So thanks for the question. I hope that helps you out there. Sam Hogg, what's my least favourite model in terms of rules or looks? Least favourite. Right now, as I've just found out, the Legion Glaive, which is a big super heavy tank that I did enter into Golden Demon the same time as I entered that Storm Eagle gunship, doesn't have 40k rules. Very, very annoying because it's quite an expensive, lovely looking model and I can't use it anymore. It can only be used in 30k and I don't play 30k. So right now, from a rules perspective, because it doesn't have any, and Forge World aren't going to give it any, I've got a rather expensive doorstop sat in a cupboard. It's actually up in the loft now, doing nothing, and I'd really like to use it in some apocalypse style games. I could, you know, make some rules up for it, but I don't really want to. I'd rather be given the rules because that's what I paid for. So at the moment, that is the terms of rules. I don't like it. In terms of looks, I don't know. There's a few dodgy models out there. It's probably the worst one at the moment. I don't like the remake to Logan Grimnar. I said I liked Logan Grimnar earlier, but I don't like the remake of him. I think his neck looks a bit funny. There's a few dodgy ones out there. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but from a rules perspective, because there aren't any, Forge World, please watch. Can I have some rules for the Legion Glaive, please? Thank you. Dylan Johnson has asked what my favourite model is. Again, I've just answered that a little while ago with Logan Grimnar, so we'll move on from that. Nick Hawkins has asked, how did I paint Araman? I haven't painted Araman. Well, I haven't finished painting Araman. Let's be more specific here. I've done 2 Exalted Sorcerers and some Aspiring Sorcerers for my Thousand Sons, but the big boss of sorcery, Araman himself, I haven't actually painted him. So, but the Exalted Sorcerers, if you go and look at my Rubric Marine painting guides, I've basically painted them the same as that. So they've just got a little bit more detail because they've got some magical stuff going on with them. So, but from a blue and gold and yellow perspective, they're painted the same as the Rubrics. But yeah, I haven't painted Araman, sorry to say, but Exalted Sorcerers, yes. Araman, not finished yet. He's a work in progress, as many things are. But thank you for asking. Isaac Cajo's got a really good question here. Of the 2 years I've been doing this, which video has been the most fun for you to produce? That's a really cool question. What's been the most fun? Because fun's quite a personal thing. I've had successful videos that took minimal effort, and I've had videos that have taken hours and hours and hours of editing that no one's really bothered to watch. And that's quite disheartening when you put a lot of time and effort into a video and lots of stuff you don't see, like all the cuts, all the edits, all the music, all the graphics that you might throw up on, anything like that, Photoshop graphics that you spend, 2 hours making a thumbnail for, and then only 30 people bother watching the video. That's not fun. But then you go and do a video that's just chatting about a Warhammer community page, which a lot of channels do, daily stuff. Let's go and read someone else's content and make a video with some responses on. I've done a couple like that, but they've been very targeted and very specific, like the FAQ ones, for example. So they've been easy to make, and they're quite fun to go through and see the video, see the content, and see how that will change an army or change a faction or change your mentality. But they're easy to make because it's just opinions about something that's just been released. But they get a lot of people to watch them. But I do like doing the ones about cost saving. So I've got 2 videos that I've really enjoyed making, actually, which is the recent one about the new battle forces for Christmas, so the £100 sets with all the content in, and how each different faction, they're worth a different level of discount to you if you broke the boxes down. I did it with the start collecting videos as well. They've had some good views, and I've actually enjoyed doing the calculations on them, breaking down the units, seeing what they're actually worth. Quite a bit of research goes into that to make sure that you're fairly accurate. A little bit of mathematics, and then some nice, cool Photoshop editing. So that's quite fun to do. So for me, it's a combination of good views, lots of effort, and some good fun making some cool graphics in Photoshop. So probably those. That'll probably do for the answer for that. Thank you for the question. Jedi Jim has said, "Do I have a backlog of unpainted minis like most of us?" Now that's a question. Do I have an unpainted backlog? Well, if you were around at the 500 subscriber video when I promised you a Warlord Titan this year, and I haven't delivered a Warlord Titan this year, well, there's 6,000 points of an unpainted model to start with, let alone the many others of boxes that sit in this cupboard just over here that is full of stuff. Now, I have sold a little bit this year, to be honest, but that cupboard, is full of unpainted models. I am guilty, Your Honour. So yeah, I have a metric load of unpainted minis like everybody else. 13BN13BN has said, GW has been doing remakes of older character models, Khan, Typhus, etc. What would you like to see done next? Kind of similar vein to the Primaris project. I'd like to see Dante get a new model. I'd like to see Ragnar Blackmane get a new model. I'd like to see, as much as everyone goes on about some of these new kits, plastic Aspect Warriors for Aldari, Eldar, Craft Worlds, please. Those things have been metal forever. They've been remade in Finecast. They're still only available in Finecast. They need serious work. They are the mainstay of the damn army. They are the mainstay of the faction. So how can you have what people should be using in that army instead of just being Dark Reapers, which is what Eldar are doing these days? Please make plastic Aspect Warriors and not rip us off like you do with the Dire Avengers. £5 to £22.50 is outrageous. So I don't want to see 5 Banshees for the same money. That's what I want next, actually. Screw all the character models other than Dante and Ragnar. Plastic Aspect Warriors for the Aldari. That is what is needed. Thank you. Cheers for the question. Rich O'Keefe, Dark Angels, Council Loyalist. Everyone knows the answer to that, so I'm not going to entertain that. Everyone knows. Let's move along. Chaos, obviously. Dirty heretics. Shadowcat has asked, well, what music do I like? All kinds. I typically like people that write their own music and can play instruments. So people like Ed Sheeran I really like at the moment. I do like Adele. I've actually been and seen her. Was it this year we went and saw her? I think it was. Fortunate enough to get tickets to go and see her. Really like that kind of style. Historically though, I like people like The Jam, Pink Floyd, who else can we think of? Rolling Stones, and who else is probably top of the list? Stone Roses. Yeah, Stone Roses have been a big fan of theirs for a long time. Seen those back in the 90s as well. I think at Reading Festival, I think I went and saw those guys. Tremendous live. They've been back out on tour recently as well. So yeah, a mix of good current stuff, not too poppy, but good singer-songwriters is what I like, and some of the classics as well. Thank you for the question. Green Stuff Games, how do you like the painting in the back of this video? So I mentioned this artwork before that has lights. Now these are an LED strip light. So they come on a big roll. They're about 10 quid for a roll that's about exactly that length. In fact, it goes all the way around and then comes out on this little cable, which you can't see on this camera. Let me move around. Let's do this. And there we go. We can actually see behind the scenes here. Let me get rid of that. So you can see this photography light. I was mentioning that earlier, right? That's a panel light that comes down here. On here is the swing arm which mounts my painting camera, so you can see onto the desk from this other camera. And then cables going everywhere. And that is the power cable for these LED strip lights. As I said, let's come back to here. As I said, I think they're £10 a strip, and I think it's about £5 for the power adapter. So you can do that. A lot of people use them to light all kinds of stuff. They're used in kitchen lighting and things like that. Making cool looking. They come in different colours as well. I think you can get more expensive ones that you can change the colour with a remote control as well. But yeah, as I said, sort of 10 quid a strip. I just stuck them round the picture. So that's why I used to like those, and I think they look all right. So thank you for asking. Wargaming Wizard, what got me into the hobby? That's the third of these questions. So sorry, I'm not going to answer that again. Just rewind from this point and you'll see the answers to that. But thank you anyway for entering. Chin Boy, I think I'm pronouncing your name right there. I believe you're Vietnamese, right? Why don't you try to become a Xenos, like for the greater good? Appreciate there's some language issues there. Appreciate English probably isn't your first language. With so many Space Marine armies, why don't I try and become a Xenos? I did have a Tau army, didn't like them. But I do have a Necron army. Praise be to the Necrons. And I do have a Craftworldian army. So I do have 2 Xenos armies. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm trying to cut down a little bit so that I've got 2 Chaos, 2 Imperium, 2 Xenos, and then some outliers, so the Knights and the Titans and the Adeptus Mechanicus. So my 2 Xenos armies are Necrons. I've got about a 2,000 point Necron army. And my Elder army is, after I've slimmed it down a bit, I did sell a little bit of it. So it's still over 10,000 points strong. So I do have those, so I'm not going to be going into Tau anytime soon. I did have a little dabble before, but yeah, it wasn't for me. Really not a fan, let's be honest. But thank you for asking. Bogged Down, what do I think about the new Calgar model? Kind of covered a bit of Primanius Calgar already. I like the concept, I like the idea that the Space Marine heroes are getting a new set of boots, and it advances the storyline. Calgar with his daddy about these days, getting the first new revised suit as a chapter master, I think is a good idea. So I'm all for it. Thank you for asking. Pyro Painting Studio, what got me into the hobby? Yep, we've been there. This is what, the 4th time of this question, unfortunately. So I'm not going to cover that one again, but thank you anyway. What has been the single most exciting moment in my gaming or hobby experience? Now that's a unique question, I think. The single most exciting moment. Probably the first time I got nominated for Best Army at a campaign event. So I've been to many campaigns over the years, and getting that nomination for the first time is kind of an acceptance that, as historically as I've always been a painter more than a gamer, that a bigger audience has now got to see my work for the first time. So this is pre-social media, really. No one was, there's Twitter and Facebook and things like that weren't really a thing at the time. So really this was kind of going into public with sort of 150 odd other people with your forces, and you didn't really have a reference point to see how good other people's hobby was. All you saw was heavy metal, from White Dwarf, and that was pretty much all you really had to rely on. So going to one of those events, and then that's a player voted thing to see who gets best army. I didn't win it, but being nominated was kind of an acceptance that my stuff looked cool enough in other people's eyes. So not a specific gaming event, but a gaming... Not a gaming event, but a gaming event. Does that make sense? It's something in my hobby that I was really proud of. So I hope that that covers that for you. Wizard Wargaming, we're back to what got me into the hobby. Yep, that's counting now. We're on 5 of that question, so we'll move on. Chris Davies Chapman, well done on the 1,000. Would I ever build up to guest battle reports? I think that's guest battle reports. We did clarify that. Yeah, with other YouTubers. Well, I've already featured on Idic Beer's channel, so we've had a game. We've actually got another one in exactly 1 week's time. The Revenge of Nick versus Nick, as I head down and take on his armies, whichever he's got for me. Once again, we'll be playing 2 games. One which will feature on my channel and one which will feature on his. Looking forward to that. He's a good laugh. He's a much bigger YouTuber than me, so it's always nice to go and feature on that. And maybe in the new year, might have a chance to meet a few other YouTubers as well. So, yeah, watch this space. I do have a couple of people from podcasts that appear on my channel. So, the Bearded Gamers podcast, Dan from that channel has been on here. Rich O'Keefe from the Floorhammer podcast has been on this channel as well. So yeah, I've got some people that I know that do content creation of one kind or another. So yeah, who knows in the future whether other channels will appear or I'll appear on their channels. I'm hoping so. I think we've got a really good community within the Warhammer Unification Group, which if you haven't joined, go and check that out, because there's a whole bunch of really cool content creators, from really big ones, 50,000 plus subscribers, to really small ones with 5 subscribers. So you get a really cool mix of hobby cross-section, addressing various different factions or aspects or approaches to the hobby. So who knows, I'm hoping to meet a few perhaps next year. Phil Hoggart has asked the big question I didn't want to answer this year, which was, how's the Warlord Titan getting on? The 500 subscriber giveaway, I did kind of promise to finish the Warlord. And I have a list of excuses of why it's still sat there primed. One of which was the event, the campaign event, which burnt out sort of 2 months of my time painting those. So that took me a few months beyond the 500 subscriber mark. And then I found every other reason not to do it. It's still very intimidating. I finished the build, which is a big milestone, because for the 2 years or so I'd owned it, I hadn't even finished building it. At least I finished building it this year, which is a big step. Next year, am I going to promise it now? Next year's the year of the Titan. Let's say it now. Next year is the year of the Titan. Because I've got some other stuff to do. So I want to get this terrain out of the way. Next year. Honest. Unless I find another reason not to. Which I'm hoping not to. Navani666. Am I worried about Idic Beer's new little construct for our future battles? So his Seraptic construct thing for his Necrons, his big Forge World purchase of this year. Am I worried about it? Of course not. I've got a Warlord Titan. Why would I be worried about that little thing? No, but I'm actually going to go... I'm playing Nick in a week's time. I think we're going to have a game with that construct in play. So I'll have to find something suitable to counter it. So of course I'm not worried about it. There's always a bigger fish. But thank you for asking. Orco Maniac has asked, what made you start your YouTube channel? I covered that. That's the second one of these ones, so that's cool. Not too bad. We're not up to 5. What got me into the hobby? Still counting. But yeah, inspired by console gamers that I know, and just motivation to get back into the hobby. Combination of the two. So thank you for asking. And then we're on to Danny Eccles. I have a question for you. How's the Warlord Titan coming along? Or did I miss some videos? No, you didn't miss some videos. I'm still ashamed. No, it's not been done. It's still primed. It's still sat just over here beyond my PlayStation on the end of the desk. It's still black. It's still painted, primed. But that is it. But as I said only moments ago, 2019, year of the Titan, you heard it here first. Spect has asked the best question of the day. How come you are so awesome? The response is, no, you're awesome. and that is it. I'm not awesome. I just do stupid hobby stuff. That doesn't make anybody awesome, but thank you anyway. I'm glad you like what you see. Redbeard Boss. Am I going to the LVO or Adepticon with my new YouTube money? Well, now that you've hit 1,000 subscribers, the other challenge about earning money through YouTube and ad revenue is to hit 4,000 watch hours. So you see quite a few channels that, you know, accelerated subscriber growth, but no one's actually watching or retaining their videos. But I am pleased to announce that I have hit 4,000 hours. So people are actually watching. They're not just clicking on and going, yep, great, I've seen that video. They're actually watching, I think on average, 35 to 40% of every video, which I think is pretty good. I'm sure you all skip through the little musical intro that I do. There's a refresh of that for the new year. You might skip through the end section where I summarise, or you might skip through the intro, and you might just get to the meat of it and then you skip along and skip along. I completely understand that. I do something very similar. I might see what the video's about, I skip through, you know, fast forward and go, right, I want to watch this bit, cool. Skip through, watch this bit, and that might be 30 to 40% of a video. So people are watching my channel, which means that once it's been reviewed by YouTube, I will be able to turn some advertising on and make about 3 cents a video. So with that newfound richness of 3 cents a video, and I've done 200 videos in 2 years, so if I'm averaging 100 videos a year at 3 cents, that makes an income of $3. So with that newfound richness, I don't even think EasyJet do a flight to Adepticon or the LVO for $3. So maybe I might have to skip. But I'd love to go to the Las Vegas Open. I know a few people that went, like Aceface and so on, went this year. Well, back in, was it January or whatever it was. I'd love to go to Vegas and play Toy Soldiers. Unfortunately, I'd probably get distracted by all of the gambling and all of the cool shows and stuff to do. I did go to Vegas with my 40th birthday with my wife. It was fabulous. Do I want to go to Vegas and play Toy Soldiers? Probably, providing that I'm there for a bit longer than just to play Toy Soldiers. So, but not at $3 a year income from YouTube. So, but thank you anyway. And with that, that is all the questions answered. So there we go then, guys. That's going to wrap up this FAQ video as part of the 1,000 subscriber giveaway. Hope you enjoyed some of the answers. Hope you learned something new about me and my hobby. If you did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall catch you guys on the next video.